Mittens, it is Sugar for House of Cyanide, and I am going to be talking about Yule, the longest night of the year, some of the history of that, and I guess dealing with death during the holiday season. And I don't know if this year is more so than usual, but I have noticed a lot of death this year, like in the last month or so, last 2 months, much more so than normal. I know, at least in my personal life. And I've definitely noticed it through friends and families as well. I lost my uncle, and it always seems so much harder to lose someone during the holiday season, because the holiday season is all about getting together with family and being cheery and being, you know, just it's supposed to be a joyful occasion. And so when something happens to make that not joyful, it seems to hit so much harder. And as pagans, we need to realize that although you know, the Yuletide is a joyful occasion, it's not, how do I say this? It's joyful almost in a macabre way traditionally. Traditionally, this is the dark time of the year, where the year is split in two sides, the light, which would be the summertime, and the dark, which basically would be wintertime. Okay, and this is a very abbreviated, simplified explanation. And this time of year is supposed to be about basically death and loss. Like, that is traditionally what this time of year is about. Yule was celebrated by the Norse, and Samhain was celebrated by the Celts. And if you look at some of the history and do your anthropological research, you will realize that the two holidays actually overlapped. They were not celebrated the way that we celebrate them now together, okay? The one culture had Yule, the other culture had Samhain, and they were essentially the same holiday in a lot of ways, okay? Now, the reason for this is because the different geographic locations had different seasonal weather patterns and things of that nature, okay? So they weren't celebrated the way that we do now, where we celebrate them together. It's and we celebrate Yule differently because of how we celebrate Samhain. But what we need to understand is that Yule has this dark undertone. This holiday season has this dark undertone. It's winter time, and that means all of the animals are the ones that do not make it through the winter are dead or dying. The plants are dead or dying or in hibernation. And just because it happens out there in nature doesn't mean that it doesn't happen to us. The whole reason why we have the harvest in Samhain and why Samhain is called the blood harvest was to thin the herd and to harvest from the animals that would not make it through the cold, hard winter. So the weak and the sickly. And that is why there are humans that die during this time, because just what happens in nature also happens to us humans, but we've gotten so far removed from it that we're not accustomed to it anymore, and it comes as a shock from us when that happens. But if you've noticed, there is a lot of death in November and December. And the reason why is because this is the time of year when people die, when people depart from this world. This is the time of year that most people do that. And the whole reason for the celebration of Yule and the rebirth of the light is to celebrate the fact that even though a lot of the people are dying this time of year, and I remember typically before modern medicine and modern technology, people fell ill, people fell sick, you know, because of the cold. They got, you know, it was not unusual for people to not make it through the winter. And I think that we need to realize that that's a natural part of this holiday, and by accepting that and embracing that, when it does happen, it won't be such a shock to the system. And also by embracing that and understanding that, I think that there'll be less pain in the world, because there are those out there that feel like, specifically this time of year, like they have to have the big family dinners and spend all the money and have this big joyous celebration, and when they don't have it, it hurts even more so. And so that's why this is the time of year when there's a lot of suicides and things of that nature. And I know in a lot of ways that this stuff gets glossed over. And the reason why is because there's this forced cheeriness, and I personally believe it's unnatural. I believe it's unnatural for everything to be happy and gay and just perky, and I know in a lot of ways this time of year grates on my nerves because of that. Like, I feel like it's being forced upon me that I'm supposed to be feeling this way, and I don't. And I think it's unnatural, and I think that is a part of this holiday that we've gotten away from. We've gotten away from the fact that Yule is a death holiday. It is a death holiday the same way that Samhain is. It is about remembering those ancestors that have passed and rejoicing in the fact that they will be reborn again. And that's what this holiday is about. It's about the rebirth, about them being born again, and about the reincarnation cycle. That's with the whole concept of the rebirth of the sun and all of that. But so much of this gets lost. To give you some basic historical information, I took some notes. I've actually done some extensive research on this because the writing project that I've worked on, and this is just going to be some basic information out of my research to give you an understanding of where my point of view is coming from and why I'm saying these things. And I said that this is the dark half of the year. Many Indo-European pagans celebrated the dark half of the year from basically from Samhain all the way through to Beltane. And that whole section of the year was tied to death. That whole section of the year was in remembrance of the ancestors. And a lot of times, like Yule and Samhain, were actually celebrated from what we would consider Samhain all the way to Imbolc. And that Imbolc was kind of the break of this mourning period. Okay, and that was kind of the celebration of things coming back into life. And that's why Imbolc used to be such a huge, huge holiday. And because we've gotten away from the roots of the traditional meanings of Yule and Samhain, Imbolc's no longer really a big deal. I think a lot of pagans celebrate Imbolc and they don't even know the true meaning behind it. And so that's very important. So anyways, to get back to what I'm trying to say here, do you guys know where the name Yule comes from? Where the etymology of that word is? Yule actually comes from the name Yule-Nur, which is the name of Odin. Okay, so Yule is actually, Yuletide was Odin-tide. It was the 12 days of Odin. Okay, that's where that comes from. The reason why, this is why it was called Odin's Tide. The Yule feast is association with the cult of the dead in connection to the wild hunt. Again, it's a lot of the same stuff that we typically associate with Samhain. Those same death associations and ancestors are connected to Yule, because Yule is the Norse version of Samhain. It's kind of their culture or background with the same meaning as Samhain, because Samhain is the Celtic Gaelic version. Remember, you're dealing with two different cultures from two different geographical regions, and so basically we've taken two ethnic religions and mixed them together to make what we know as modern day paganism. Okay. Typically the wild hunt was led by Odin in his Yule-Nur form, and as Yule-Nur, he's in his god of the underworld form. And so what he was doing in the wild hunt, now this is the wild hunt of the dead, not the wild hunt of the Fae. The Gaelic Celtic traditions have more of the Fae wild hunt, while the Norse have the wild hunt of the dead. And that's why there's sometimes that confusion of the Fae and the dead and crossing the worlds, and why sometimes the Fae, you know, in some mythos the Fae are the dead, and you know, the other world is part of the underworld. And if you've done your research, there's a lot of like confusion and connection between the two, and that's why, because one comes from the Norse and Asatru, while the other one comes from the Celtic. And so again, you're mixing two ethnic religions together, there's going to be some confusion. The wild hunt was led by Yule-Nur on Sleipnir. Now I apologize if I'm saying these traditional names wrong, like if I'm mispronouncing them. It's not my native tongue, so I'm doing my best. Yule-Nur led the wild hunt on Sleipnir, and his job was to go hunt down basically those souls who tried not to cross. That was kind of the purpose of that. And those like oath breakers and things of that nature, these were people or spirits or souls who didn't want to move on. They wanted to stay and cling to this realm. That's some of the history on Yule. And so I know there's a lot of people out there that are dealing with death this time of year, and it's so much harder. But please understand that that is a part of this time of year. It's part of the natural cycle that is associated to this time of year. And that is something that we as a modern society have moved away from. And that is unnatural for us to move away from that. So I know this is probably going to be a controversial video, because everybody is going to be making happy, like, yay, happy holiday videos, and here I'm saying that this is actually more of a solemn occasion. And in a sense, it really is more of a solemn occasion. It's a time that we can be happy. We're celebrating the life that we have, and we're celebrating the next life that we're going to have, and the fact that this is but a journey, and that there really is no end. It's just a cycle. But it's okay to mourn the loss of your loved ones. It's not unusual. In fact, it's common for older people, and for there to be a lot of death this time of year. It's actually very common, and I think that it's very unnatural for us not to recognize the fact that that's common. And I think by not recognizing it, it makes it more painful for the people that are experiencing it. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe, comment down below, even if you want to say how horrible of a person I am or that I'm completely wrong, be my guest. And I'm just glad that you left me a comment. And let's see, I already said subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter, Sugar Cyanide. I'm also on Facebook, facebook.com/sugarcyanide, or excuse me, facebook.com/the Sugar Cyanide. You can either add me as a friend or you can go to my fan page, but I'll be honest, I don't really update the fan page that often because it's not as useful as the as my friends list, and all my posts are public, so if you would like to follow me there. Alrighty, well, thank you very much. You guys have a great day. Bye-bye.